Welcome everybody to a lazy Saturday afternoon. It's a little rainy outside. Actually, I was just going to do a live stream tonight, and then after the Nebraska loss, which I was expecting, don't get me wrong, but I felt like I had to get a little of this out of my system, maybe draw a picture. So here I am. I got one of these. Do you guys have one of these? It says the first 25 issues of Conan, which is interesting because the first 24 issues are Barry Smith. And you think they would have stopped there. Why add issue 25, which was just the first issue of John Buscema, and that's it. So you get like 24 issues of, well, there's a couple of, I think there's a couple Gil Kane fill-ins in here someplace, but I mean, that first 24 issues, that was Barry Smith's run, and then you got one issue of Buscema. It seems odd place to, I would have ended it at 24, then started the next volume with the Buscema stuff. I don't know, that's just me though, what do I know? Hey, everybody, let's see who's here, shall we? Let's just see who's here. Jimmy Owens was the first one in the door, so he gets absolutely nothing for that, but I think it's important that we recognize the first person in, so let's do this. Yeah. JP Roca's here. Bill Maxwell is here with his Captain America shield. Prater 7. Yesterday's Fool. Jeff Stout. Apparently wasn't too thrilled with the debate last night. It was a little long, and there was a lot of I tuned in and out. When you have two people with opposing ideologies, discussing something or arguing something, or neither one's going to be convinced, and most of us watching are already convinced one way or the other. So, I watched some of it, and some of it I didn't watch, and then Shelly and I kind of showed up at the end to sort of throw in our 2 cents worth, which wasn't much, but there you have it, until our internet went bad, which is another thing. My internet sucks, man. So hopefully I won't bleep out during this. Komanga says, how's it going, Aaron? It's going well, actually. Usually I sit in front of the TV on Saturday and just watch college football until my head explodes. But Nebraska was on early, so I watched that game, which is actually a pretty close game, but too many dumb mistakes, boy. Isn't that the truth? But don't get me started on that because I could go all day. That's true. That's true. But 3 hours was even a little much for me. So I was, like I said, I was in and out, catching some highlights here and there. God, that's an interesting question. It seems like the end of every decade, people in the industry are kind of like, well, going to start having to looking for a new work because this industry is going in the toilet. I mean, it did it in the late 50s. It did it in the early 70s. It looked like it was dead in the 80s, and then the direct market showed up. 90s, we had the big, explosion of collectors flooding into the market and driving up sales on everything, and then the market crashed horribly. Marvel was looking, go bankrupt and looking to sell, and everybody thought, oh, this is the end for sure, but we keep limping along. But I think everybody always sort of had good intentions, Marvel and DC, to try and figure out a way to make money. I don't know that that's either one of the company's intentions right now. I think activism is maybe more important to them than good product. Maybe not, entirely, but I think that they're battling that right now, which I don't think is good. If you're producing an entertainment product, you should be going out of your way to produce an entertainment product that the most people are going to like and buy. And I don't know if that's what's going on right now. So how long? I don't know. I mean, eventually everything dies, right? And or reformats itself. I don't know that comics goes away. It's, you know, it's an American art form. It's now it's a worldwide art form. It's a great format for telling stories. But will it remain the way it is? I don't know. I mean, we see everything else, print media basically dying, you see magazines going under, and comic books are essentially magazines, right? You know, at some point, you outkick your coverage, as they say in football. And it's basically, you have a core established group of people that may be on the high end or my age. And are we bringing in new readership? So when, you know, people of my generation tap out, how many people are going to be left to kind of pick up the pieces? I don't know. It's a good question, but we'll all be sitting around here watching to see how it turns out. But in the meantime, we'll keep slogging along, and hopefully, at least maybe in the independent market, we can keep the art form going. You might be right. You might be right. We shall see. Yeah, that's kind of the point I was making. I agree. Daniel Russell says he's got enough kids to keep it going. Good. I mean, my son is 28 and he reads, but all he reads is old stuff. He doesn't read any new stuff. He's not interested in it. He buys the essentials and reads that stuff, you know. And I remember I've quoted this before on this live stream, not this particular one, but this show, Aaron Live, that Dan DiDio was famously a couple of years ago made the comment that, I'm pretty sure this is accurate, that he said that the DC collections of older material were outselling the new stuff, and it was really sort of ticking him off, you know. And it's, I mean, that tells you something, right? So anyway, so the big question of the day is, for now, or right this moment, is that Wraith of God ends at midnight tonight. So the question is, do I extend it? Do I end it and go in demand? What should I do? Well, you know, the logical thing would be probably to extend it, right? I'm going to do technically a closeout live stream tonight. I don't know. This is kind of a warm up. I don't know if it's going to be on my channel or if it's going to end up on somebody else's channel, or if I'm just going to bebop around, or if I'm just going to have people drop in on I don't know. You can tell I'm really organized. But chances are I'm going to extend it 2 weeks, but I won't. If I extend it, it won't be longer than 2 weeks. I just think at some point you're just sort of, you know, dragging your heels, especially with the option of the campaign being able to go in demand and stay open for, you know, casual ordering until, you know, the book goes to press. So that'll be for a couple months. So, you know, I would like to see this thing get to 90,000 before I close it. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But we'll see how it goes tonight. But there's probably a decent chance that I will extend it a couple weeks. So as they say, this would be the first 30-day closeout. So we'll see. But pay attention to I'll be on social media letting you know when, after this stream, when I'm back on later tonight. Well, I absolutely want to get to 100K, but I think I can do that. I think if I extend it, I can get to 100K. I think I can get to 90 tonight. We're at over 85 right now. So that's kind of my short-term goal. Yeah, I'm not going to extend for another 30 for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons is that the research shows there's kind of a sweet spot in there between 30 and 45 days, and after that point, it's not necessarily all that effective. And plus, when you're in salesman mode all the time and you're going 30 days, I mean, you're doing the 30-day preview, right, where you're just getting people to sign up for it, but you got to promote. Then you go live for 30 days, and now you're trying to get actually people to back it, right? So now you promote. Then you extend it for another 30 days, and you're like, promote. I just want to get working on this thing. I want to dial back a little bit of you know, being on the internet all the time, and actually working again. It'll be kind of a refreshing feeling to kind of get back into it, and just maybe just doing my Sunday show and then the professionals on Thursday night. And then, every once in a while pop it in to show you guys what I'm working on and the progress and everything like that. So Too Much says, I have full faith this is a 6-figure book and happy to be a backer. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Jimmy Owen says, I see 100K in your future. Paul is right. Eventually you have to get back to working mode from pitch mode. And that is the truth. And I'm doing that right now. I'm cleaning off my plate. I had a few, covers I had to get done. Then I'm finishing that stuff up. And I don't know what's up with the pop-up book. I turned in the layouts and I was supposed to have confirmation on those last week. It hasn't happened yet. So I don't know. That's may get drug out longer than I would like, but it is what it is. So anyway, so let's draw a picture, shall we? I disagree. I mean, if it's in demand, you can say that forever, right? That I can keep it open forever, and you're leaving money on the table because you're always going to get some people coming in. But the in-demand option makes it pretty easy to keep the campaign open without, being a pitch man 24/7. But we'll see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I'm really keeping an eye on that. I was like, I don't want that to happen. But I think I'll go back a copy of cover A to go with cover B. I think you should at least get 2 covers. Cover B is kind of my favorite too. That kind of retro 70s look. In fact, what he's referring to would be this one right here. Somebody actually said on Instagram, goes, "Hey, you got a real good Gil Kane vibe going there." And I said, thank you, because that's exactly what I was attempting to do. I love the old Marvel stuff, I must admit. Yeah, you always print over on everything because you want to have some, because there's always going to be people that come in late, right? You think that you're promoting the heck out of the thing, and then you think, how could I possibly reach one more person? I've been promoting this for so long, but then sure enough, someone comes up and goes, I didn't even know this was out there, so. Oh, I'm sure it is in terms of, the marketing strategy to it, but you've got to be, Ethan is more of a Stan Lee than I am. I think I'm more of a John Buscema. So, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Well, I can tell you right now, I'm 72 pages from completing it. I've only got the 3 pages done. All the stuff I've been working on in the interim is, the card art, the covers that I had to do, the prints, all the extra stuff. Now we got the sticker set. All that art has to be done. And so that's the kind of stuff I've been working on and doing some layouts, but I haven't actually started drawing the interiors. But I expect to do about pencil and ink about 20 pages a month. We'll see if I can keep that up, but that's my goal. So I would assume this thing is going to be done early January. And I would hope that my colorist and my letterer are right behind me, so that there's not much wait time beyond that. And then, you're off to the printer, and then you're shipping out. My ship date is April. I hope to be ahead of that, but we'll see. It's a long project. It's not just a comic. You're looking at a 3-issue plus miniseries is really what it is, put into a single graphic novel. So it's there's a lot of work involved, but Nothing I can't handle that I haven't handled my entire career. Well, that's probably true, but I want to, I want to be responsible and provide what I've promised. If, I'll keep you guys updated, obviously, on a weekly basis on the work and stuff like that, because there'll always be new stuff to show without, of course, ruining the comic by showing you everything before you get it. But you guys will definitely be in the loop constantly. Your Empire Comics, you'll always be pitching your wares, be it first, second, third. That's true. I will be, but I mean, not at the extent of not working is the point. And I've been kind of full-time promoting, and I have to get into at least full-time working and half-time promoting or something. That would be 1.5 times, which is probably not good math, but yeah, because it was actually Alex. It was actually a Wraith of God was actually a Western ghostwriter proposal for Marvel back in the 90s that they weren't really interested in at the time. So I just changed the character and changed some things up and made it my own. So it was an inspiration. Paul says, you're the most punctual artist I have dealt with, and I thank you. I wear that proudly. Well, and that's the idea, right? I mean, you fulfill the campaign, you do it on time, you do top-notch work, and then people can trust you going forward that they're going to get something good from you next time around. So obviously that's my goal as well. This being a first-time successful campaign for me, even though I've got a 30-year career behind me, I still have, I still have to prove that I can deliver on an independent level like this, and I can and I will. Well, by working, it is working. Definitely, it's working. But I mean, the physical drawing is what I'm trying to get across. That I have to have enough time to physically draw the book. I can't be promoting all the time, and then not getting any work done. It's kind of my point. Okay, so let's flip the camera. I'm using, of course, the quality brown paper so that we're not going to get horrific reflection. Can I have a... Oh, yeah, you guys can see that fine. Look at that. Now, I'm thinking about, I should draw more of my characters to promote my stuff. And I know everybody loves, classic Marvel or DC characters, and those are fun and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, it's not really getting anything accomplished other than, producing a single piece of artwork that, sure, yeah, I can probably sell, but I want to be promoting your own stuff. DC and Marvel don't need my help, that's for sure. So I thought I'd go ahead and do a Garbage Man piece today. So how about that? As October rolls around, I should do some monster movie stuff, because that would be kind of fun. I actually have to look back at my. Just wanted to make sure I remember which hand was which arm was which. It's funny, even though it's your own character. If you haven't drawn it in a while, it's kind of like, wait a minute, what goes where? Gotta get this stupid autofocus off, because it keeps turning itself back on without my permission, which is just not cool. Okay. So it finally started raining around here. My dog loves to go outside and, you know, nose around and dig around, and which is fine in the summer when it's dry. But yeah, when it's wet outside, not so much. So we have to be waiting by the back door when he comes in so we can dry him off and get him cleaned off. Now he smells like dirt. Which means somebody, probably me, is going to have to give this guy a bath. But then as soon as I give him a bath, he runs back outside and smells like dirt again. So I don't know. What's the point, really? Dude, get out of there. Quit chewing on that stuff. Someone asked what my favorite Universal Monster movie was. That's a... wow. My favorite Universal Monster is Frankenstein, but it's Boris Karloff Frankenstein, but it's not necessarily my favorite movie, although they're great. I really love Creature from the Black Lagoon. But I also really like Werewolf of London. Bride of Frankenstein is quite good. God, that's a good question. Probably Creature from the Black Lagoon. Probably, he says. That's about the best answer I can give on that because it changes. Whereas Jaws is my favorite movie all time. I guess mainly because I've just made that decision, so that when people ask me, I can say it. But I have never made that decision with Universal Monster films. Not a big Dracula fan, but other than that, I love them all. Couldn't wait when I was a kid when they would have them on like Saturday matinees. I mean, on TV. They had something here in locally on a local station called Brunch Theater. And it was on Saturdays at like was it 11:30 or something like that? So right after you got done watching cartoons, the Brunch Theater was on, and oftentimes they would show monster films. Then, of course, at night they would Friday and Saturday night they'd have like Creature Feature and things like that that would show old horror films. Used to stay up late and watch those. Sinister Cinema was on at like 11 o'clock at night, or 11:30, and then after that was over, they would be followed up by Creature Feature, and so, which I think usually came on at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was really a challenge to stay up till 2:30 or whatever to see this whatever monster movie they were showing, and but yeah, the innocence of youth, right? When that was like the big thing, is staying up late on Friday night to watch a monster movie. Fox Mulder is giving me money. Thank you, Fox. $10. That's very appreciated. What's the most obscure monster sci-fi film you're a fan of? Okay, I'll give you an obscure one. Probably 14, Esteban, not 30 though. What is my favorite? Okay, here's an obscure one for you. Speaking of creature feature, there was a movie called The Thing That Wouldn't Die. And it wasn't, it was kind of a misleading title. But there was this like old conquistador, I guess. And I can't remember the details because I think I've only seen it once or twice in my life. But somebody had his head, okay, and they had it in a like a hat box, right? And they kept it in the closet, and he mind controlled whoever had his head, right? And eventually, the thing was he was a guy that had been decapitated, right? This conquistador had been decapitated, and he wanted his head put back on his body. And so the whole thing was this head, I think it was a woman had it, and I don't know why. I think they found it like buried someplace, and it was still alive, and it like mentally controlled them or whatever. But eventually the idea was that the big climax was that he would lead this hypnotized person who would be carrying the head around by his hair or whatever, and put it on his decapitated body, his corpse, and then he would come back to life, right? And so that happened at the end, and then there was a spoiler alert. Then there was like a sword fight between him and the hero, and he ended up getting killed again. So anyway, yeah, there you go. It is one of those. It's just one of those goofy things. I'm sure that's just me describing it to you, you're like, yeah, wow, Aaron, I can't wait to see that. I mean, when I was, I don't know, when I was like 9 or 10 and that was on, I was like, it kind of freaked me out, but now it's kind of silly. But that's, you talk about obscure movies, that would be up there. I actually prefer the good ones, but another one I really like that maybe a lot of people are unaware of is Tarantula. It was one of those 50s, nuclear explosion giant bug movies. Although I think some mad scientist, this doctor guy, Lee, I don't know what the heck was his name. He was in a lot of those things. He had a really long, round face. I can't think of the guy's name, but anyway, he played the scientist, and he had experimented on these, making animals larger. And of course, he was messing around with the tarantula, and it became this humongo thing. But I thought for a 50s movie with the, limited sci-fi special effects, they actually did a pretty good job, with the thing. It was mostly just, they would green screen a tarantula and make it look really big and have it crawling over hills and stuff and things like that. But I thought it worked okay. But again, I haven't seen it in forever, so don't quote me on that. But I remember really liking that movie in terms of big bug movies. And Them, of course, was really good. The giant ant movie. Excuse me. Well, Young Frankenstein is like one of my all-time faves, but hardly a horror film. But hilarious. Great movie. This kind of bugs me because they don't like like Turner Classics. Well, maybe they're better, but what am I trying to say? What's the other? AMC, American Movie Classics, right? Like in Halloween, they play like Halloween 4 and stuff now, and it's like, how is Halloween 4 classic? I mean, it's not even a good movie. You should have a little bit more or a little better taste, I would think, than that. But so that's what they always show that stuff on, American Movie Classics instead of like the older, what I would consider classic horror films. So it's a little annoying. You don't actually get to see those as much anymore. But I guess something from 1980 is considered classic these days, right? So I guess it's all perspective. That was in the 70s. Kingdom of the Spiders, the Shatner he's referring to. That was in the 70s when Nature's Gone Wild, movies were just really, really prevalent. There was like, was it Day of the Dogs? And then there was, Lepus, which was the giant rabbit. And Frogs, if you remember that, with Ray Milland, where all the reptiles were, turning against Sky on this island. And I never quite figured out how the frogs actually killed him. Did they gum him to death? I mean, I can see the snakes and stuff, but being poisonous or whatever. But frogs? I mean, that was the image of Ray Milland laying on the floor at the end of the movie, and all these frogs covering him, and you're like, how did these frogs actually kill him? I could see how they annoyed him to death, maybe, but yeah, in the 70s, Food of the Gods was another one. They did an adaptation of the H.G. Wells thing in the 70s. It was all, nature gone wild, getting even with man for, abusing nature or whatever. That was like the huge theme in the 70s for a while there. God, there was these bugs that came out of the center of the earth. They were all like, really hard, like rocks, but there were these big bugs that flew around and burned people and stuff. I can't remember what that was called. But that was in the 70s as well. Attack of the Killer Leeches. Giant humanoid leeches in the swamp eat people. 1950s circa grade, C grade creature feature. Wow, that sounds good. This is an excellent question. Sometimes I have a really clear idea of what I want to do, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with this Garbage Man piece. So that's why I was able to sort of kind of put it down pretty quickly. A lot of times, though, well, I'm not going to say a lot of times, but sometimes you're just kind of, you can fool around on the page a little bit trying to figure out what you want. And sometimes it doesn't come as easy as you'd think. I mean, that's a good way to, or the good reason why you use layouts and stuff before you do comic book pages, so you can kind of figure that stuff out before you get onto the page. Now, after you've been doing it as long as I have, I very rarely did layouts on the page, or pardon me, layouts like thumbnails before I would actually start drawing on the page. But if you want to do something, if you really want to, you're not just necessarily trying to meet a deadline and doing basic storytelling, but you're trying to do something a little bit more memorable than that, then, you take the time and do your page layouts. You can, like I've done a few times on this stream with the Wraith of God layouts, you kind of lay out your basic storytelling because you know what you're fundamentally what you're trying to tell story-wise, and then you kind of get that laid out, and you kind of look at it and say, okay, how can I make this more interesting? How can I change angles to get something that's more interesting to look at? But it depends. I mean, sometimes you just get a real clear idea of what you want to do, and sometimes not so much. You kind of think maybe you do, and then you start drawing in it. It doesn't look the way you thought it would look, or it doesn't quite have the visual impact or the dynamics that you were hoping it would have, and that, you scrap it and start over. I'm guilty of doing that a lot as well. This character is fun to draw because there's so much, like any muck monster, you can go to town putting, weird things sticking out of them, or, like with Man Thing, do I want to have tree branches growing out of them? And, as much you can put as much detail into it as you want, right? And that's kind of the fun thing. You can just kind of noodle away on these characters. And when you're sketching like I'm doing, it's not, it's not necessarily I'm going for a finished product. So I can just kind of take my pen and just start throwing stuff here and there, and creating textures and stuff without really thinking about it. Or obviously, if I'm doing a page or a cover or something, I would tend to tighten up a little bit and try to be a little bit more specific about what I'm doing. Although with Wraith, I do want it to have kind of a little rougher, looser feel, because like I said, it's kind of want a spaghetti Western feel to the thing, like a, Sergio Leone movie or something, so that it's really not clean and slick looking, because I don't think that's really appropriate for the feel I'm trying to get for the story. So a lot of this sketch stuff I do on these live streams is really good training for me to kind of alter my approach to what I'm going to be doing on the book, so I can be more in that mindset, and less of my what I've been doing for most of my career, which is superhero stuff that is really sort of slick and refined. Because there's a certain amount of energy you get in your sketch art that you don't necessarily get when you're, doing a slick ink job on something. And I've always tried to figure out ways to keep the energy that's in your pencil work when you're inking, so you're not inking the life out of the drawing. The problem is, when you start inking, you start kind of focusing on the line work and the process of inking, and you don't really look at the art holistically. You kind of just look at it in sections and like, ooh, is that line right there? Is that really nice? And, is that a perfect line, and all that kind of stuff. And when you put a bunch of perfect lines together, what you've got is a stale drawing when you're done a lot of times, because it doesn't have any energy or motion to it anymore, because there isn't any uncertainty in the line work, that might generate a feeling of energy or movement. It's all just kind of slick and refined, and it becomes a statue. And that always bugged me in my work, so I always tried to avoid that, and I wasn't always successful. Guys like Lee Weeks and stuff like that, or Ron Garney, they have a very loose style, but God, their stuff is so full of energy. It's just electric. So we'll see how much of that I can bring into, let's put a syringe in here, just for the heck of it, stuck in his leg, why not? Yeah, how much of that energy and stuff I can bring into this Wraith of God and still maintain a real high level of quality. The thing with Garbage Man is he's got all these toxicity spots on him, and I can't remember where they all go. I have to sort of look at behind me at my reference, which is the banner that's just right behind me. Got a bullet shell sticking out of this arm, which is very weird. So basically he's made up of, like dirt and debris. But he has these color spots on him that are like toxic waste mixed in there. That makes him potentially deadly. So I had some fun playing around with that in the original stories when he fought that. It wasn't a werewolf, but it was like a kind of a wolf monster thing that he battled out in the woods in, I don't want to say issue or the 4th story arc. And the creature tried to eat his arm. Didn't work out too well for him. Oops, a spoiler. All right, so he's got like a big old spot on his chest here. He's got another one down here, but I think I'm gonna some of this stuff I'm gonna darken in, put some shadow in here. Oops. Darth Josh has, excuse me, has jumped into the, oh my gosh. Dan Erickson, who lived across the street from me growing up in my youth, gives me an ouch, Nebraska. But the thing is, Dan, they were supposed to get blown out in that game, and they only lost by 7. So I'm taking a moral victory on that game. Micra jumped in. Grumpy Old Ninja Kantaro Oe. Is that Oe? Oe? Ola and Hale popping in to smash that like and share the stream, Aaron. I just backed your Wraith of God campaign and made sure I scored Garbage Man with it. You're an awesome artist. Thank you very much, Grumpy Old Ninja. Appreciate it very much. Randy Howell chimes in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Randy. Can't hang around as I need some exercise, but I will come back tonight. Best of luck blowing past 90,000 tonight. Thank you, Randy. I think we're going to get it done. Well, there's a Phase 4 is a 70s film where the ants became super intelligent. Once again, nature gone wild in the 70s. Okay, so if our lighting source is the moon over here, now we're going to drop some shadow on this guy. Use some use some spots in there for little detail work. So I'm thinking that shadow is probably going to come around like this. So really, I just put a bunch of detail stuff in there that I'm now going to cover up. It's probably always smart to spot your blacks before you start putting detail work in, so you don't end up, covering up stuff you just drew in there. You'd think I would have learned something in 30 plus years, but perhaps not. I've always been one, as much as I like, shadowy stuff and, monster stuff. I've always found it hard to sort of cover stuff up with black, because I'm at heart, I'm really a detail guy, and I like to draw the line work and the detail and the veins but pieces of artwork tend to be, or comic art, tend to have a lot more impact and drama and three-dimensional weight when you use a lot of heavy blacks. And I know that, and I'm always happy when I do it, but I always find I have such a hard time covering stuff up, because I like to go in there and noodle and draw and and for a guy who's a fan of Wraithson like I am, think that I would be a little better about using these solid blacks. Oh, a Cornhusker question. Well, OU they used to be their rivals back when they were all in the Big 8 and the Big 12, but they're not in the same conference anymore. So this was a non-conference game for both of them, which seems kind of odd, because it was their big rival back in the day. I suppose now it's Iowa just because of proximity, but Nebraska's only been in the Big 10 for 10 years now, so I don't know that they have any really well-established rivals in that conference. Plus, when you suck like Nebraska has sucked for the last 10 to 12 years, it's pretty hard to have any rivals when you're just getting beat by everybody. When they were good, they used to have rivals. I think I'll just cover that up like that. I recently refilled all these blacks, and they're just flowing so nicely. I know, me too, but you can't argue that the benefit of using blacks effectively, how it really adds volume and weight to your drawing. And the funny thing is, it's not, sometimes you feel like, oh, I'll just cover everything up in black and I don't have to draw anything, that it's kind of cheating or whatever. But placing the blacks correctly so that you really create a nice piece of work is challenging. And David Finch does it super well. Kevin Nolan does a really great job of spotting blacks and using them as almost design elements on the figure. So then you get these blocks these blocks blocked in. You get these blacks blocked in, and then you can sort of detail over the top of them and still get, you know, a nice feeling of detail. So I can still put in, you know, some veins or whatever, put in lots of line work. So you can see I'll be doing a lot of noodling in here. Because as much as I like line work and, you know, detail, if you want to refer to it that way, I love when the characters have volume to them, because that's really the goal, isn't it, to create a three-dimensional figure on a two-dimensional surface. So having something that feels like it has some weight to it, I think is a great accomplishment. I always felt like Chuck Jones's Looney Tunes cartoons, especially like when he was really hitting stride in the late 40s and early 50s, that his work, well, of course, it was the animation of Abe Levitot and Ken, I almost said Ken Russell, but no, Ken Harris and somebody else. That did the actual animation, but, you know, of course, they were using Chuck Jones's character designs, and his cartoons, to me, always felt like they had way more weight to them than, say, someone like Freeling's, who felt flatter to me. McKimson did a pretty good job of weighting up his characters, I thought. Although I didn't like his Bugs Bunny design nearly as much as I did Chuck Jones's. But he still was, McKimson was still able to get a lot of weight and heft to his characters, I thought. Now, see, technically, this whole arm should be in shadow. And I was just too gutless to do it, but I'm doing it now. Seems to me I read someplace, or maybe I heard him many moons ago when I would have conversations with Mike Mignola, him saying that he used to take tracing paper and put it over the top of Frazetta paintings and drawings and use a marker and then kind of just mark in where all the blacks were, and how Frazetta used blacks to create volume, and he used that to sort of shape his style. Because he said he always wanted to be like Bernie Wrightson, but never felt like he could achieve that level of craftsmanship. So he decided to go more stylized and was using Frazetta's, how Frazetta spotted his blacks to create volume and to draw your attention to what was important on the figure. When you look at any Frazetta drawing or a painting, and you'll see like the legs will, you'll have a lot of detail right in where he wants your eye to be looking, in the face and the upper chest area or whatever. And then as the legs go into the dirt or ground or whatever, they just sort of become one with the ground, because they're not important. He doesn't want you looking at, the texture on the boots, for example, because that's not where he wants your eye. That's not where the attention for the drawing should be. And so Frazetta, of course, did a fantastic job of making sure you were always looking at what you were supposed to be looking at and not paying attention to stuff that wasn't important. And if you look at Mignola's stuff now, it's kind of what he does. It's sort of like he uses black, really heavy blacks to. Tim Sale does the same thing, where you just, what's going on here, here, and here is not necessarily important, but maybe what's going on right here is. So if it's blacked in, you're not going to be looking at it. You're going to be looking at the stuff that the artist wants you to look at. But again, as artists, it's, especially if you're a detail guy, you sit there and you just want to, render the crap out of everything, and so that you're just bombarded with detail, which in sort of a visceral way sometimes is really kind of cool, but it's not always the best way to tell your story or get the reader looking at the stuff that you want them looking at, or to keep their focus on where you want them to keep their focus. But comics have been such a slave to detail over the years, or become that way, that line work and stuff is so important to us as artists that it becomes, I don't know, we're kind of a slave to the technique of it all, and not necessarily always paying attention to the stuff we should be paying attention to, like leading the eye and storytelling. And by storytelling, I don't mean panel-to-panel storytelling, but storytelling just in terms of what am I trying to get across with a single illustration or a single panel. Because the reality is, when someone's reading a comic book, they spend about a minute looking at the page, right? So the art's important, obviously, but when you're putting in this mind-numbing detail, and it sort of overwhelms your story to the point where people are, going, "Ooh, look at how he shaded that," or whatever. You're not really reading the comic. I mean, I think you want people to appreciate your artwork, but you want them to be able to get through the comic effectively, and then if they want to go back and really appreciate what you're doing artistically, that's a bonus. But the number one priority should be getting people to read the story and clearly understand what's going on. And then the showing off, you kind of balance that with you showing off as an artist. But it's a hard thing to do, because you're drawing, and everybody thinks that the more detail you put in something, the cooler it looks, which is true. But it's not necessarily always what best serves the storytelling. Hey, Mike Miller is in the house. Aaron. I feel like coming out of ego. Let's see here. No, I don't, you know, I think a lot of these times on streams like this, you know, you do want to watch and kind of see what the person's doing. It's kind of mesmerizing. It's like watching a fire, right? Um, Not a destructive fire, you know. I mean, like in a fireplace, you know, you can kind of get mesmerized by the flames just flickering, and that's kind of. Um, I mean, I'm sure most of you guys have checked out David Finch's show, his live stream, whatever, where he just draws and has, you know, other artists on there showing technique and talking about technique, and it's like he has a huge following, and he's not necessarily doing, you know, talking to people in the chat and all that kind of stuff. He's just kind of drawing, and but people obviously find it fascinating because he has huge numbers on that show. But you can start to see, you know, putting in the line work that, you know, as you look at it closer, you can get your detail in there and still use a lot of heavy blacks. Oh, Art Thibbert, Artemis Tiber is in the chat. Everybody, go to Indiegogo, and as you're backing my Wraith of God campaign, click over and back Black and White Volume 2. That Art is about a week behind me. He launched about a week after I did. And let's say this about Art. Art can really draw. And I'm always just fascinated when I see guys that were, you know, mostly made their career by inking, and then they turn around and start drawing stuff, and you're like, dude, why weren't you penciling your whole career? So Art does really nice work, and you should give that Black and White a serious look. See, Art understood. This is looking like garbage in a good way, you know. It's not like, hey, that hat looks good on you, you know, kind of thing. From it's like Caddyshack. He's like, oh, this is the worst looking hat I've ever seen, and he's like, oh, but it looks good on you. I love Rodney Dangerfield, or loved him. I guess he's not with us anymore, but this is one of these characters where you can just keep drawing little things sticking out of them, you know, and bumps and spots and cracks and little pieces of dirt and rubble falling off of them. I mean, you just endlessly do that. And at some point, you have to catch yourself and go, oh, okay, I'm done. I'm thinking of putting up a couple more original art tiers on the campaign when I go into that 2-week extension. And I have a lot of people asking me about that. Are you getting more original art up? You know, and I'm not going to sell the interiors, or at least not my plan to sell the interiors to the book. So, you know, there's only a limited amount of card art and stuff I'm actually going to have available for Wraith. But, you know, if I can put up some other little Prestiverse stuff like, you know, Kit Carter and Garbage Man and things like that, but, you know, maybe some people are interested in that. We'll see. Have him stepping out of a trash can. He's not Oscar the Grouch. He'd have to be coming out of a dumpster, not a trash can. See, then I look at this and I think, well, okay, there's probably should be more shadow down here. Got a lot of rebar sticking out of him too. Well, I don't know how much rebar ends up in landfills, but it's the thing. It's like sitting there trying to think of, okay, what can I draw coming out of this guy that, I don't want anything huge like a toilet seat or something like that because it would hinder his movement or whatever. But just little things like maybe a book of matches or something like that, and nails or something like that. Give him a trash panda for a sidekick. That's true. But if you're in the big city, right, and there's a lot of, shall we say, unfriendly smells already in the air, you might not know that it was actually Garbage Man that was creating the odor. So, but like any good hero, he mostly fights with monsters. So monsters don't really care about your smell because they probably don't smell good themselves. Yes, that's a good idea right there. Plastic 6-pack rings. Oh, Art's mixing it up in the chat, man. He's Art's you don't think so, but Art's a bit of a wild man. He'll get after you. No, I got to say that our professionals crew is really a bunch of good guys. So guys willing to help each other and promote each other, and it's a nice crew. I do have to admit, if I could make a living just doing this stuff, just sketching, there's something really sort of free and liberating about drawing like this. I remember talking to an artist one time, and he was just like, yeah, I think I'm just going to go to shows and do commissions and see if I can actually make a living just doing that. And I think you probably can to an extent, but you got to figure at some point, everybody in your fan base is going to have a piece of original art from you, and then it's kind of like, then what do you do, right? So I think you have to produce story content at some point to kind of stay relevant, at least in this particular market, meaning comic books. I don't really know how it is in the, say like the children's book market or something. It's like, or, if there's an artist out there people like, or they, they buy a book for their kid, or they're waiting for the next project that they seem they do it with authors and stuff, but I wonder if they really do it with artists, or they just don't really pay attention to it. But in comics, it's a different thing. People do sort of pay attention to the artist. I mean, not everybody, but we tend to be in a very sort of writer-friendly or writer-dominating period where people seem to sort of glom onto the writers and attach themselves to writers, but don't necessarily give a rip about the artist. And I mean that in the sense that, if you're drawing something by a writer that someone likes, and they'll pay attention to you. But as soon as you move off that book, or or a character too, I found that a lot with Wonder Woman. I was very popular when I was drawing Wonder Woman, but I didn't necessarily take the Wonder Woman fans with me to my next project. They kind of were Wonder Woman fans, and I just happened to be the guy drawing it at the time, and so they was popular with them while I was drawing the book. I always find that kind of an interesting phenomenon, because I mean, I had characters I liked as a kid too, but I always tend to follow artists. But I am an artist, so that people that are not artists may look at things differently. So that's right. Mike does have a wrench, so be careful. He might go all mod on you. Now Mike's working on some really cool NFT drawings. As I told him before, that most of the NFTs I've seen are just crap, artistically speaking. But he's got this monkey thing going on that is really well drawn. And but I don't know if that's even a criteria for people to buy those NFT things. If they care if it's well drawn or not, or even if they particularly like the design. I mean, I think they're just buying them for collecting purposes. I don't know. Leave it to Stephen Ng to come up with this. The two best-selling kids graphic novel creators, Dav Pilkey and Raina Telgemeier, are writing and drawing their own work. Well, then you don't have to separate the artist from the writer, then, do you? Well, I think that's ultimately what would, creative-wise, that's what you'd want to do. That's what I wanted to do, because I always, even as a kid, I always kind of looked at myself as a storyteller as much as just an artist. And so I always, wanted to write my own stories. And I always did that as a kid. And I did a lot of writing when I was in film school as well. When I say writing, I'm not talking about writing a novel. I'm talking about entertainment writing, scripts and things like that. But I'm not someone that would jump at the chance to write a monthly book necessarily. I tend to have come up with story ideas and concepts, and then I'll do that story, and when that's complete, I'll move on to something else. Like, you know, I wouldn't approach, say, Wraith of God, for example, and as an ongoing, in the sense of a monthly book. But if I can do a series of stories, they're connected, of course, but that's just more comfortable for me to think that way in terms of, like, doing the movie and then doing the sequel or whatever, as opposed to trying to drag a book on month after month after month, and like you're writing a soap opera or something. Look at that. My mom always kind of mocked American comics because in Japan, all the manga are done by the creators, not hired hands. Very interesting. It is interesting, though, because not everybody can do both things, or do them well enough to get by. But to me, again, comics are a storytelling medium, and so it's like it's just like film. You're telling a story. You're not just drawing a picture. And so I always felt those two things went hand in hand. And so I always enjoyed the writing aspect as much as the drawing. Although I'm a little bit more touchy about my writing, and that may just be because, I used to be, I guess we're all sort of touchy about our art as well, but we've learned to take the criticism because you get so much of it. But when people criticize my writing or something like that, I take that super personal, but probably just because I haven't experienced the criticism on the level that I have of the artwork. So I'm just not as thick-skinned about it as I am about my art. Because the thing with writing is it's always easy for someone to say, oh, I would have done this, or why didn't you have the character do this? And you can always say that. There's always that. Everybody's got ideas about how they'd like to see things done, or how they would have done it, or very rarely do we actually see a movie or read a book or something where everything is like, wow, that's exactly how I would have done it, or that's exactly as I'd hoped it would be, or something. There's always usually a scene or something where you go, why did they do that? So I think maybe it's easier to critique other people's writing than it is the art, because the art feels more like craft in a way. Writing is craft, obviously, but art is sort of, you feel like you need some sort of art education to go in and really critique somebody's art, other than just saying, I don't like the way it looks. Whereas writing, it's more, I don't know that anybody sits there and goes, I didn't like the way they used the language in that book. It's more like the ideas that you're using in the book that they thought, well, wouldn't have been better if you'd done this, kind of thing. So I don't know. I think it's just easier to criticize writing, or people are more tempted to criticize writing because it seems like it's an easier thing to do. The critique, not the actual writing. Because I know I've rewritten Wraith of God multiple times because I had an idea for something, and then it was like, oh, that'd be much better if I did this. And then you look at it, and a couple months later, you're like, God, it'd be much better if I did this. I've had the advantage of spending years working on that Wraith of God script, whereas when you're doing a comic book and the script has to be done, um, you better hope your initial ideas are pretty good because you don't really have a lot of time to go back in and change them. Well, Michael Golden always is my answer to this. Michael Golden's my answer to that question all the time, Paul, because he was actually art director at DC when I got a critique from him, and it changed my life in terms of how I, you know, looked at drawing and storytelling, And if you want to know what I mean by that, I did a video called "What I Learned from Michael Golden," and it's, if you like and subscribe to my channel, which you should, you can go in there and look at my archives and find that video. It's only about 5 or 6 minutes long, or maybe 10 minutes long. I don't know. It's not very long, but I discuss what Michael Golden told me and how I learned from it, and it really did change my life in terms of visual storytelling. What I learned in film school, just about storytelling in general, visual storytelling, was a little bit different because it was more about clarity and not getting in the way. Meaning, if you do all these really sort of moving shots and things like that kind of call attention to themselves, you take people out of the movie, which is, you don't want to do that, right? Comics are a little different because you do sort of want a wow factor to your work, but at the same time, you don't want to pull people out of the story either. So there are some elements that are the same, but using a Dutch angle, which is basically a crooked angle, turning the panel, on a little bit of an angle to create dynamics in a panel in a comic, is something you'd never do in a movie because it looks silly. Like when they did it in the Batman television show, or Joel Schumacher tried to do it in some of the Batman movies, and it was just a disaster because it just comes off as corny and ridiculous. Whereas in a comic book, it helps create motion and dynamism to an otherwise static image. So you're trying to accomplish two different things, but the rules of storytelling are still pretty much the same. You don't want to take the person out of the story that you, in the world that you created for them, by doing something that's just so ridiculous that, like breaking the what do they call it, breaking the third wall or breaking the fourth wall. Unless you're doing it for comedic effect, right? Like in Ferris Bueller or Deadpool or something like that. Well, it's not too shabby. Let's get a little bit closer here. Let me see if I can put a little bit of marker on here, just because. Since the paper's already brown, I don't necessarily have to go in and do that much markering with my warm grays here. I do want to do the color spots though, because if you don't do the color spots, you sort of lose them in all the other line work. So the one around his eye is always green, which it just looks great, you guys, unfortunately. Then he's got some blue ones. So I'll go in and, actually I'll sharpen this first. So this guy up here is blue. There was a time when I actually remembered all this stuff. God, that looks gray too. Oh well. Trust me, it's not. So get all the blue spots. I'm not even going to erase this and clean it up because, quite frankly, it's garbage man. So why would he be erased and cleaned up? I got green down here. And some purple. Will that actually look purple? I don't know. I think this one is supposed to be purple too. When I first started designing this, I had all sorts of colors all over him, and he looked like a, you know, a children's doll or something with all these color spots all over him. I was like, okay, so I got to have some color in there, but I've got to not get so carried away with it that he's got, you know, 100 different colors on him, because then it looks kind of silly. And he's supposed to be brown, so I'll go ahead and put a little bit of brown in here. Can even, I can't really see it on there very well, but, oh, wait a minute, I had a color spot over on his shoulder. What color was that supposed to be? Oh, it's green too over here. This paper is pretty heavily textured too, so it's like I can just do this and I get kind of a, I do it kind of loosely and I'm still going to get a decent even spread, I guess, or even texture. This is lighter. His like big cement arm is a lighter brown, but I'm just going to go with a little bit of yellow here, but very lightly, just to warm it up a bit. I got another color spot hiding in here I forgot about. Put a little yellow in the moon. Put a little gray on this rebar. Some of these pieces maybe. Just going to hit this real light. Ooh, Fox Molder, have you, thank you, sir, for the $10. Have you given any hints as to what the secret bonus is that will be unlocked once the campaign hits 90,000? No. Because I'm not sure. Actually, what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to expand the sticker set and get some guest artists to do it, so it becomes a little bit, instead of just more of my art, which is, you know, it's a good thing, but I also like to have some other people involved. I mean, the next really big one is the, so we get to $100,000 and I can do the Ace of Spades playing card, which is incredibly expensive, which you wouldn't think it would be, but it is. That's why I had to do it as a 100,000 stretch goal instead of the earlier ones, because it just wasn't cost effective. Because that's the other thing you don't even really think about is like, well, the higher you go up in you know, hitting your money goals, well, the more, that means the more backers you have, right? So that means whatever you're giving away free goes to all the backers, which means there's, you know, a lot of them now when you're hitting those numbers. And so then your printing cost goes considerably higher. You know, if you're thinking in terms of, well, I only have to produce 500 of these, you're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. But now, but when you start saying, well, I got to produce 1,500 of these, and it's like, okay, well, how much is that going to cost? And so you have to sort of weigh those things into, you know, provide you guys with cool stuff for backing the project, but also ones that doesn't, you know, isn't counterproductive to reaching those financial goals, and you end up spending more money than you actually are making doing it. Because a lot of my stretch goals are extra printing stuff. I don't know how many people actually do that, but we're into, you know, a print, a card, a sticker set, another sticker. You know, so 4 of my stretch goals already are, you know, stuff that involves extra art on my part and printing costs. So I have to sort of take that stuff into consideration too. All right, that's not too bad. Yeah, let's see, where are we at? With writers being criticized more, do you have thoughts on why a collaborator like Chris Claremont was so popular through the 80s, but has constantly put down by fans since the mid-90s? Okay, let me get ahead of myself, or let me get caught up here. Yes. I don't recall that. Okay, so this was, with writers being criticized more, do you have thoughts on why a collaborator like Chris Claremont was so popular through the 80s, but has been consistently put down by fans since the mid-90s? I don't know that. Here's the problem I have. I never read, I know this is sacrilegious, but I never read the X-Men in the 80s at all. I was never an X-Men fan. So I'm not really, other than generally knowing and understanding what was going on in the books, I wasn't really reading them. And I think writers can, like anytime, like artists, you can get you can sort of get into a formula where you're just doing the same thing all the time. And then, it works for a while on a certain book at a certain time. And then you continue to do the same thing, but maybe on a different title, but you don't really recognize anything as being different or new. And you feel like, oh, he's just rehash. And I'm not saying this about Chris because I haven't read enough of his older stuff to compare it with like the stuff I worked on Excalibur, which I thought was fine. I thought it was a little slow. I mean, everything Chris, well, I shouldn't say that. I say a lot of what Chris did was very character driven, and there's a lot of characters in X-Men, but I think there was also a lot of big events in there, and I don't know how much of that was Chris, how much of that was John Byrne, that was pushing those things. When I worked on Excalibur with Chris, there was some action, but there was also a lot of character stuff, which was interesting, I thought, to read, but maybe not as exciting. And so I think if you have that formula and it works one way with a certain book. I mean, if you remember Excalibur, when he was writing it and Alan Davis was drawing it, that was a very character-driven book. And they had some weird stuff going on in it, but you read that book because of the character interactions and stuff. And I think X-Men was a lot like that as well. And I just think maybe people, if you can't adapt and change and do something different, I just think things, people, styles, approaches run their course. And then something else comes along that attracts everybody's attention. I showed a couple shows ago, I showed some of my Saturday Evening Post J.C. Leyendecker covers, and Leyendecker was like, I mean, he was the man, right, in the early 1900s and into the 30s, but eventually his style became kind of passé, and the story goes that he was near the end of his life, he was taking his portfolio around to ad agencies and stuff in New York and couldn't get any work, even though he was brilliant, because it just wasn't what was in vogue anymore. And so I think that happens to everybody to a certain degree. And Chris is probably just a victim of that, just like many of us are. And I think it's a little harder, maybe stylistically, to change your approach as a writer than it is as an artist, because an artist, you can kind of like pick up somebody else's style and just kind of draw a different way if you feel you need to. How do you write a different way? I don't know. I mean, I write the way I write, how I express my ideas. I guess it's a matter of what kind of ideas you're expressing. Are you expressing the same ideas over and over again? And I think we're all sort of can be guilty of that as well. We have to catch ourselves and make sure we're not writing the same story over and over again with just different characters. So I don't know if that's really an answer or not, but because I don't know. Yeah, I mean, basically for years they've been paying Claremont not to work. So that's a very weird thing. In some ways, it's like saying they're respectful of what he's meant to Marvel and the franchises, but at the same time, they're like, we don't like your writing anymore, but we'll give you this, but we don't want you writing any more of our books. Who knows what people think? People in charge of stuff are, they're products of different generations and different ideas and blah, blah, blah. And so, what worked in the 80s is no longer, something that people want to see here in 2022. It's a tough racket, man. It's a tough racket being creative. So, okay, we can see the color on there better. Actually, let me fire up this light over here, if I may. There we go. So you can see the color there a little bit. So anyway, there's your little Saturday afternoon distraction. Went over an hour and a half. That's something. I will be back tonight though at let's see, probably I would guess around maybe 7 o'clock Pacific, which would be 10 o'clock Eastern, I think. Something like that to kind of do our first 30-day closeout live stream. We'll see if I'll invite whoever wants to drop by and chat it up a little bit, talk about art, talk about comics, and push the product. And then we'll see if I push the button to extend it or not. Well, I'm going to, but it won't be for that long. But so I would encourage everybody to sort of get in there, and if you haven't done it, please go visit the Wraith of God campaign, which is in the description here, and back it if you can. Let's see if we can get this sucker to 90,000 before midnight tonight, and then of course set our sights on the $100,000 goal by over the next 2 weeks, and get that Ace of Spades playing card with the Wraith on it. So I think that would be pretty cool. So anyway, if you can, join me later this evening. I assume it's going to be right here on my channel. Who knows? I might bop over to somebody else's channel, but I will eventually be back here, because since I'm on the West Coast, and the campaign closes at 12 o'clock Pacific, that's 3 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm guaranteeing you that if I'm on somebody else's stream for a while tonight, it ain't going to be till there at 3 a.m. So I will be back here eventually, if I'm not here the entire night. So we'll shoot for 7 o'clock. I will put out an announcement on social media. Keep your computers on so when it dings to let you know, and then come back and join me. And I think I'm going to draw Kit Carter and maybe some other stuff. So there you have it. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody here. We just got a Claremont X-Men discussion going on, which I can't really contribute much to since I didn't read it. All right, everybody. Hey, and also, let's all remember, I've been so caught up in pushing Wraith, I forget to do this. So like and subscribe. That's always important if you haven't already. And also, like I said, I'll be back tonight, but I'll also be, Shelly and I will be on tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I think, Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern, for our regular Sunday night show. I think I'm going to have someone on maybe by the name of Aaron Sparrow to talk about toys, because I want to talk about toys, and he's my toy insider. So anyway, join me later tonight, and mark us on the calendar for tomorrow evening as well. Thanks for joining me this afternoon, and we'll see you later this evening. Thanks. Until we meet again.